Hi there, I'm Mike. Welcome to my shop, Bubba's Workbench. So, this video is short of being an utter disaster. As I've mentioned previously, and in case you didn't watch previously, I've been having a lot of technical difficulties, so I was getting this video edited about 3/4 of the way through. I'm realizing how much stuff was actually missed, and of course the stuff that was missing is the stuff that I thought was more important to be showing rather than just drilling and cutting. That's not as important as there were some certain details I want to make sure I noted. So what I'm going to do is we're going to try our best to salvage this video, and I think I'm going to do a little bit more talking and telling you how to do what I did. And when I'm able to, we'll interject some video footage of me doing those things. So, what is this video all about? Well, this is the modifications I made to the Ed Stiles box joint jig. So that's what we're going to showcase, and I'll go over the three main things that I did that I believe increase its accuracy, its repeatability, and adds new functionality that I don't believe there's a box joint jig that exists on the market, whatever you want to call it, that has that feature built in. So let me give you a little tour of what it does. Okay, so let me go over quickly what it is, or what my thought process is on how I think we can improve this. As I stated before, the jig works perfectly. It does what it's supposed to do, and it does it extremely well. The biggest problem I had was keeping count. Unless you put a little mirror over here, which is what Ed Stiles recommended, I didn't do that, and it became a real nightmare knowing where I was at. Did I count 2? Did I count 3, 4, 6? Whatever my numbers needed to be, I kept messing that part up. Extremely frustrating. So I've come up with some ideas that will take the counting guesswork out of the equation completely and give you nearly autonomous results in an analog fashion. Okay, so the first thing that was added is a T-track system. Now this is actually a miter track, and in a minute I'll explain why this is miter track and not your standard T-track. So, added a T-track system, which allows you to add fixtures here in the form of stop blocks. And this, for me, is quite possibly the greatest feature on this jig. And if you don't do anything else, this alone I think will help to improve the accuracy and repeatability of any box joint you want to make. And what do I mean by that? Well, this stop right here is your zero stop. So what will happen now is when you zero the blade to a piece of wood, you can set the block and lock it down, and now you have zero set and it never has to be touched again. And that right there, I mean, saves you so much time, because now you can pull a piece of wood out and not worry about anything. As long as you put it up against the stop here, you know it's at 0. And in a moment we'll explain, well, what happens if you move? How do you get it back to 0? That's one of the other features we'll get to in a second. So the secondary stop here is so that when you're doing standard finger joints, you usually offset the second board. Well, what this will allow you to do is then set a second stop for whatever that spacing needs to be, however wide your board is, and space it over. Now, unfortunately with this, if you're using too large of a board, you're not going to be able to go far enough out, and I found that out the hard way. And then on top of that, what I'm going to do is we're going to put in a couple little spacers here, little backers, and what I've come up with, this is my solution for counting. And I just got myself some, corner molding, and this is going to fit in place here. And I don't know why that, there we go. It's a little bit of play, but not much. It doesn't need to be too much in this part. So what's going to happen is we're going to I have a piece of aluminum here. I've cut some strips, kind of polish them up just a little bit. This is going to be mounted here, and this is going to be your pointer. And then with your pointer, you'll know where you're at. This is a piece of aluminum. It's 1 inch wide by 1/16 of an inch thick. One thing I want to mention about the cursor system, my original idea for this is for it to have a little bit of adjustability. So I was going to have threaded inserts here, and then the holes would be enlarged so that I can move this up or down so that it'd be as close as I could get it to the template. Well, what I quickly realized is plywood and the end grain of plywood, not a good idea for putting those threaded inserts in. And they probably would work. However, the problem I was having is when I kept trying to drill a hole, it was just not going where I wanted to go. I couldn't get it in the exact spot. I just used 2 small little screws and it's working just fine. And I had already preset it up with a gap on the bottom using like a piece of paper, so I knew that it would clear the wood, so at least I didn't get myself into trouble there. Is once I zeroed out the front, I took a pencil and I scribed a line right there in the back. So as you can see when I back up there, there's your 0 line, reference line. Okay, now in conjunction with the other 2 items I just showed you, here's the third part that has the functionality I mentioned that no other jig, I believe, has. And I've created a template system. These are replaceable corner molding. Buy as many as you need, depending on how many different types of finger joints you want to do. What will happen is, every time you get ready to do a box, you just unscrew this, put in whatever template you want to use. And as I've stated, then you just put this back to 0. Right, I wanted to give you a detailed rundown on how you create a template. So this is where counting is very important. And, you know, we're not at 0 at the moment. Okay, we're at 0. Now, this is where you need to keep track of knowing the thickness of your blade. Now, in my case, I have a true 1/8 of an inch thick blade, 1/8 inch kerf. And now the tip I like to keep reiterating about this jig is this pointer right here. Imagine this is your blade. Well, when you're actually at 0, you are actually in the very first cut. So if I go back 1/8 of an inch, which is 2 full turns, 1, 2, you can see now you draw your first line. Okay, this is where your board would be. You know, if you're imagining visually, this is the end of your board right here. So that's the very end. So see, 0 is actually 1/8 of an inch ahead because you put the piece of wood on the right. So, you know, that's something to keep track of, because now when you're counting, you don't start counting from 0. And I found out the hard way why you don't do that. So what I do is when I'm going to create a template from scratch, you go to 0 first, and then go back 2 turns, as I just stated, making sure you only go back 2. Now you can count forward. So for instance, this gap right here is 1 inch, which is 16 turns of the wheel, because this is 16 TPI thread, so 16 turns. Put your pencil in there, boom, draw your line. There you go. And then now this gap is 1/2 inch, and 1/2 inch is 8 turns. There you go. Make sure we're square there, and you draw another line. And there you go. It's as simple as that. No high-tech marquetry here. You're going to want to periodically check yourself. A nice ruler. Before I color in each of these, my board was going to be 11 inches. I think it was, well, yeah, I believe it was 11 inches. So I marked over here to the far right. I just put a little tick just as a reference. I didn't draw a line. I just put a little tick there. That way, when I get all the way to the end, this cursor better hit that mark or my measuring is way off. That's the key. Then you know, like, you can feel comfortable knowing that, okay, when I ended at 16 over here, the very last inch, it should end where your tick mark was. Then all is good. Now, the only drawback I can have found with using this exact miter track that I used is, as you will see, the factory holes are not going to work for you because they're centered on the piece of T-track, which is great. But this overall width is, I think, 1¼ inches. Well, this is 3/4 inch plywood I'm screwing into. So I ended up needing to make new holes, and which is not a big deal. It's aluminum, pretty easy to do. But that's something to keep in mind. Okay, when you're mounting your track, one issue that I found, which forced me to have to drill some new holes, so I want to prevent you from having that same issue happen I did, is make sure the face of your track right here is perfectly flush with your front board here. This is your backer board that your workpiece can go against. So you need this track to be flat or flush. If not, it can be inset a little, but do not let it protrude, because that could throw your whole piece off. Because if, say, one side is out further than the other, your piece of wood's going to be tilted, and when it goes through the blade, then now you're going to have angled cuts. And don't ask me how I know that's what happens. One noteworthy tip I guess I can give here is the way I mounted these. The way all of this is put together is with threaded inserts. The fact that I use these brass screws is irrelevant. I'm all about aesthetics, so that's why I use those. So anyways, let me show you what I ran into, or the issue I found. Okay, so your backer board, you just mount it however you want. There's no measurements required. I just evenly spaced it. The tip I will tell you though, when you're going to drill this, that I hadn't thought about and I got lucky, is make sure the head of your drill can drill straight. Mine is so big that it wants to kind of go at an angle, so you got to be a little careful of that. Anyways, so I put threaded inserts. Now what I discovered is there's more than one style. You can see the style that's here. It has like a lip on it. Then you've got this one right here. Well, that one, it just goes all the way through. Well, it doesn't seem like that would be a problem until you put this in the wood and then you start putting these on and then start taking them off, and next thing you know, you're unscrewing this. So I quickly realized, don't get this type. Make sure you get the type that has a lip on it. Now, of course, the problem with the lip is it does raise it away. So you may need to countersink first before you put one of those in if you're going to use that type, depending on your application. Right here, it didn't matter. So step one, we have to zero out the blade. Okay, so step two, we're going to need to adjust our stop without moving this piece of wood where we just trimmed. This is one of the most probably crucial points of this whole setup, because once you get this set, you can forget it. This is locked down, so that's set. That for me is one of the nicest features of it, is that we can set your zero. Okay, so now that we have it set at 0, we can draw a line right here on the back, and this marks our 0. So now, no matter what happens, we can accurately return this back to 0. See if we can get a better shot of that right here. And see if I move it. See the line there? Now, no matter what happens, anyone's messing around, we can move. We know where 0 is. And we have a great starting point, and it'll be consistent, accurate, repeatable results.